Someone stopped you and asked for help. Let's say their car broke down or their tire was flat. If you hesitate to help them, but at that moment when they say, "You see my situation, you don't know me, but I know you. I am your teacher's husband or wife," and you agree to help, it means that you don't have the morality of helping directly, but the morality of helping someone you know. If morality has no power, it is ineffective. But if power has no morality, it becomes cruel. I experienced such an incident myself. One day on a dark night, it was raining lightly like this. While I was driving on a road, my car tire burst.
Hello everyone from Istanbul School. Dear audience, today we will talk about management and ethics. Our guest is Prof. Dr. Ömer Dinçer. Welcome, teacher.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank God. Are you all right?
We're fine too, thank you, sir. Sir, when we look at it from a management perspective, how do we define morality? What does morality mean?
In fact, morality is not only related to the management perspective, but rather to interpersonal relations. It emerges with the need for people to live together. If you recall when we were discussing management, I mentioned that management and morality emerged as a need when people came together and formed a society. That is true. Morality exists as a requirement of living together. When viewed from this perspective, it should be seen as a set of behaviors that are acceptable in interpersonal relationships and that will make these relationships famous. Here is a set that consists of value judgments such as good and bad, right and wrong, beautiful and ugly. If people behave well, right and beautiful towards each other, they will behave morally. Of course, when viewed from this perspective, morality is a very broad concept. This has religious dimensions. When we consider morality and management together, we see that they are actually two parts of a whole. Ethical principles guide decision-making processes, ensuring that management practices align with broader societal values. By integrating morality into management, organizations can foster trust, promote fairness, and achieve long-term success. When we consider morality and management together, we see that they are actually two parts of a whole. It is a matter of being. If the connection between management and morality is broken, for example, when you look at management, you may think that an injustice will occur. You might think that when morality is eliminated, there will be great corruption in government. You might think that when government is eliminated, morality will not have much value. There is a very serious difference in this respect. Now, when you look at morality individually, it is actually possible to talk about two dimensions of it, since it emerges as a need for living together. The first is the relationship between the person's own thoughts and values as an individual and as a personal value and the practices he/she carries out. Now, if there is a harmony between the person's thoughts and his or her own practices, we can think that there is a moral quality here. For example, unfortunately, one of the most important divisions in societies emerges. It emerges here. There is a difference between a person's thoughts and values and their practices. For example, while a person sees it as a right or privilege for him to pass through a red light without waiting, he may get angry when others do not. For example, this is a split. While he forces others to implement something he sees as right in his own thoughts, he may see it as a right for himself to violate it. This is an extremely wrong attitude. That is why we look for a harmony between the values people accept and the practices they do. You see this a lot in daily life, for example. Many people prefer to queue when dealing with a public office for a transaction, may not want to. In fact, they may consider short-circuiting the queue as a feat. However, This is a moral issue. Did I explain it? From this perspective, this is very important. In fact, let me tell you a short anecdote, as I think it will perhaps explain the event better. One day a person from the village meets a friend on his way to the city. His friend asks him where he is going. He says, "I am going to the city. I will buy wheat for seeds. I will stop by Mehmet Bey's." His friend tells him that Mehmet here is a symbolic name. He says, "Be careful with Mehmet Bey. Don't let him deceive you." Of course, he can't make much sense of this because as far as he knows, Mehmet is a decent man, a moral person, a good merchant. He goes there and greets Mehmet. When Mehmet explained the situation, he said, "The seeds are in the back. Go and buy how much you want, fill the scales and weigh them." He goes, weighs the seed, brings it, pays the fee and leaves. On his way out, he meets his friend again. His friend asks, "What have you done?" He says, "You have been very unfair. I stopped by Mehmet. I went to the back. He didn't even come there. I filled my sack, weighed it. I even added a tin of wheat to it. He says he bought it and came." The man says, "Oh no, he cheated on you too." Now when you look at the dimension of deception here, if the person sees the situation that will be in his/her favor as a privilege, an opportunity, or an ingenuity, it means that there is a very individual moral problem there. Secondly, in the relationship between the individual and society, if the individual thinks for himself and considers for other people in society what he wants for himself and wants for them, we can talk about moral consistency there. But if he sees it differently, then you can talk about a serious moral problem. For example, if a person is very sensitive when drinking water, but remains indifferent to others who lack access to clean water, it highlights a discrepancy in moral concern. Such inconsistencies reveal deeper ethical issues that undermine the foundation of empathy and fairness in societal interactions. But if a society does not take a stance against bribery, for example, then a public problem, a moral problem arises. Or I don't know, if a person does not see the interest rate as legitimate when buying a product, but sees the interest rate as legitimate when selling a product and imposes it, then a public moral problem arises. Like this, or let's say it was a problem we encountered a lot. When people saw us, they would love us and support us, but for someone else who was religious, they would judge everyone as not being like you. You have a Kurdish family, your Kurdish family is good, but the other Kurd is a terrorist. This describes a social separation or division. When viewed from this perspective, if morality is the rule of living together in a society, it first expresses a value that will ensure unity within yourself and then between you and other people. Otherwise, there is a problem.
So here, morality also requires a consistency that we must observe in our behaviors. And at the same time, what you said is seen as a condition of being a believer. In other words, the moral version of what we say a Muslim should want for his brother in faith, what he wants for himself, is perhaps the version in the administration.
Now, of course, for example, whether it is a split, a crack between individual values and practices today, or a crack in the relationship between the individual and society, one of the most important reasons for this is that ideological or political preferences become identities. For example, when people turn their own ideologies, their own political preferences into identities, this time they have the same ideology or the same political affiliation. It pushes them to protect each other, and here we see very serious splits. For example, those who do wrong or have moral problems feel the need to protect their own supporters or members of their own group. However, here morality does not have a different content for one or the other. It does not have a different content. If you look at it as if the arm is broken in the sleeve, if you cover it up when the members of your own party do something wrong, take a bribe or show an injustice, this split is very clearly seen. Or if you do not criticize the members of the ideology you belong to when they make a mistake, if you protect them by saying they will break their arm and stay in their sleeves. And if you exaggerate and criticize them when others do something wrong, then a very serious problem arises here.
In fact, we also encounter an immorality in the opposite direction.
So, if you are talking about a Muslim, he should have a power that can go beyond ideology or political identities. As a matter of fact, in the Quran, your spouse, your children, your family members, your close relatives, God Almighty says, may He not prevent you from doing justice. This is actually something that expresses this beautifully. It is a warning.
So, what is the relationship between morality and management? How do you evaluate this?
I just told you again. I said that the two emerge as a result of living together and that they are two parts or two faces of a whole. This is very important. Politics or management and ethics. It can be said like this. Power is controlled by morality, or politics is controlled by morality. There is a beautiful saying in this. They say morality is the guide of politics. They say it is its guide. On the other hand, it is said that morality is with power. In other words, if you do not have a power of people's morality, if you do not have a public power and you have never taken a bribe until then, this does not mean that you will not take a bribe, because you have not been tried. But if you have a power, and you do not take a bribe while using that power, then your morality has been tried and tested. When looked at from this perspective, this is the relationship between politics, administration, and morality. In other words, they complement each other in that dimension. If morality does not have power, it is ineffective. But if power has no morality, it becomes cruel, and it opens the door to injustice. When viewed from that perspective, there is something very serious between them. As I have stated at the beginning, management and morality, or politics and morality, are concepts evaluated within practical philosophy. You have to look at it that way. A distinction can also be made. Politics can be power-oriented. If it is power-oriented, as we have just mentioned, it is very likely to open the door to injustice. Or politics can be rights-oriented, justice and morality-oriented. Then it gains a legitimate content.
So the focus here is on important moral values and not immorality.
Morality is also very important for the legitimacy of politics. Not only laws, but also morality is important for the legitimacy of politics.
So, sir, how do we see the difference between morality and immorality? How should it be evaluated?
Actually, I just expressed it. Being moral is normally a conscious choice. In other words, very well intentioned. A person with pure thoughts. It does not mean that it is good. In fact, it is morality for someone who can distinguish between good and bad, who is aware of whether what he does is good or bad, to choose it over what is good. Otherwise, it may not be considered immoral if people do something wrong with good intentions, but it is immoral if someone chooses to do something that is not good. In this respect, there is a very fine line between morality and immorality. And to me, this is very important. For example, if a civil servant treats his superior differently, if he treats Asli differently, he treats his superior well, for example, to please him. He treats Asli authoritarianly, he oppresses her. If he treats his citizens without caring about them, we can see the difference between morality and immorality, or, I don't know, a restaurant owner. If a person offers a higher quality, more qualified meal to a close acquaintance, friend, or regular customer, but offers a different quality product to strangers and people he considers normal, then morality and immorality immediately become apparent. This disparity in treatment reveals a lack of fairness and respect for all individuals. Ethical behavior demands that everyone, regardless of their relationship or status, receive equal consideration and respect. reflecting a commitment to genuine equity and integrity.
But shouldn't anyone be given any privilege based on their relationship or contribution?
Yes, that is, if a restaurant has listed an item at a certain price there, a normal person acts ethically when he treats a stranger and an acquaintance indiscriminately, treating them both as valued customers. Or, I don't know, an employee never has the chance to say this at work. He doesn't have the chance to say, how much money does the boss pay me to make me work that hard? If he has agreed to work in that business for that money, it means that there is an implicit contract between them, that is, between the employer and the worker. And there, he is obliged to do that job as much as he can, and in the way he can, in return for the money he receives. When viewed from this perspective, the line between morality and immorality is really very thin, and it is necessary to observe it carefully. For example, let me give you another example. You were driving down the road when someone stopped you and asked for help. Let's say their car broke down or they had a flat tire. If you are hesitant to help him, but in the meantime you see my condition, you don't know me, but I know you, I am your child. If you agree to help when your teacher says, I am your husband or wife, you are actually directly helping. It does not mean that you have the morality of helping someone you know, but that you have the morality of helping someone close to you. This preference reveals the complex nature of moral obligations where personal relationships often influence decisions. It highlights how proximity and emotional connections can shape our ethical choices, sometimes blurring the lines between impartiality and favoritism.
Professor, this doesn't really sit well with me. Of course, we need to treat everyone fairly. Helping and caring are important qualities, but there may be times when we hesitate to do so. For example, we may worry that the person asking for help will harm us. In order to establish a relationship of trust, it may be necessary to learn who they are.
But this adds another dimension to the work. As we say, humans are the most honorable creatures. Do the actions you do for the sake of Allah. This is actually a very important thing. If there is no element that would make you worry, if you see a difference between helping people you know and those you don't know while you have the power, we are faced with a serious problem there. I will never forget it. I personally experienced such an incident and was very affected. I tell it in every environment. One day, on a dark night, it was lightly drizzling like this. While I was driving on a road, my car's tire burst. Actually, the car was new and I had a hard time unscrewing the things, the wheels. I didn't know what to do. Two young men who were watching me from upstairs came downstairs. They were dressed like that, like they were Pekmur. Their beards were long. It was obvious that they weren't taking care of themselves. And I didn't see where they came from in that darkness. They came, they said, I think you need help. I said, yes. They said, we can help you if you want. Actually, there were two of them. I was a little scared. They actually came. They helped. We unscrewed those screws. We changed the tires and stuff. And I offered them money. They said, we definitely won't take it. We came to help you. Then there were the fresh fruits I had picked while I was lifting and lowering the wheel of my car. It was still in season. They were freshly picked fruits. I don't want to talk about it. I wanted to offer them a treat. They said, we will not mix them in the cause of Allah. They said, we helped them and they ran away. Now it is useful to know that morality really gains value when a person consciously envisions doing good, helping, supporting others. Now, of course, we are coming to another place from here. Morality should not be seen as limited by religious prohibitions. If you recall, I will refer to the beginning of our conversation again. We said that it emerged with the need to live together. In most people's minds, there is an equality between religious sins and moral principles. However, morality should also be seen as a broader concept than sins. In fact, When you see religion as limited to sins, you see that many dimensions of morality are missing. In other words, just now it was about passing through a red light or waiting in line. Maybe this may not be considered a sin in terms of religion. You can only make a comment by thinking that it violates the rights of others. It is not clearly defined as a sin, but it is not morally right. This needs to be seen. So just now it was about going through a red light or waiting in line. Maybe religiously this may not be considered a sin. You can only comment by thinking that it violates people's rights. It is not clearly defined as a sin, but it is not morally right. That needs to be seen. Again, for example, I see a different attitude in this area in Muslim societies. The research also shows this. For example, especially in Muslim and Eastern societies, there is a difference between individual morality and public morality. There is a very serious rift. We see it all together. For example, in many places, using illegal electricity is not a problem for people because it belongs to the public. But if the same person buys a product from the grocery store in his neighborhood and that product leaves 1 lira less, he will feel uneasy until he pays that money. He goes and pays 1 lira and relaxes by paying his debt. Whereas there should be no difference between individual rights and public rights, or between individual morality and public morality. From this perspective, it is possible to say that public morality is not very developed, especially in religious societies or Eastern societies, because there is an understanding limited to sin. It's possible to say that there is a division and separation by seeing that a hierarchy has been established among sins in a significant part of Muslim societies. For example, in the eyes of many, taking and giving bribes is not as big a problem as adultery. Whereas adultery is an individual sin, committed between 2 people and perhaps limited to those 2 people, bribery can mean the usurpation of public profit and, for example, the rights of a whole city. The fact that people make choices without making this distinction should also be evaluated as a separation.
Yes, even though we see bribery between 2 people, it is actually a big enough event to cause moral corruption at the foundation of a society.
Of course, think about it simply. Any profit that arises in a city is the right of the citizens of that city. Now, when you transfer the rent there to yourself through bribery, you usurp the rights of that city. You will have taken over the responsibility and rights of a very large area. Do you think they are the same thing? When you look at it from that perspective, when you tell your family a white lie, in fact, you would still be lying, but its effect would create an effect that would remain between, for example, a daughter and her mother, or a father and his son. However, when a ruler gives false information to society, the lie he tells will actually have a negative effect on the entire society. When viewed from this perspective, the existence of public morality gains value and importance above individual morality. And unfortunately, we are experiencing serious problems in the formation of public morality in Muslim societies today. From this perspective, the existence of public morality gains a value and importance above individual morality, and unfortunately we are experiencing serious problems in the formation of public morality in Muslim societies today.
Yes, sir, it is really a very important issue. Starting from this point, what other moral problems might arise during the administration? How do you see these?
Of course, when talking about public morality, it is possible to talk about many moral problems that may arise with the administration. Let me give you a few examples of some of the serious problems I observed today. For example, one of the most important problems is the abuse of power based on position. Now, under normal circumstances, due to a paradigm shift, perhaps managers use the power of their position outside of the duties and responsibilities envisaged by that position. Now, in the traditional period, as we have already mentioned, the state belongs to the ruler, the sovereign. Therefore, it was important to follow the ruler's instructions and to be loyal to him. Whereas in the modern period, the state is a legal entity with a separate legal definition. It is a separate entity. Therefore, the authority you will have there is defined by law, which tasks you will use that authority for, and which resources you will use. Now, if a mayor has a contractor who fulfills all his obligations, if, while granting a license, it says, you deposit this much money to such and such a foundation and get your license, then it means that the foundation has abused its power based on position. This is at least an irregularity. From this perspective, if you use the power of your position for whatever purpose outside of that duty, you commit a public immorality. Again, for example, if you have the power and authority, if you hire someone by making exceptions to the general rules, you are abusing your position-based power. If you take someone into office without measuring their qualifications, without looking at their competence and merit, then you will have violated your public power. If you do not treat people equally and fairly, you will again be violating your public power. Examples like this can be multiplied. Therefore, not being fair in calculating the formation and sharing of rent emerges as a problem. Intermediating for public affairs, or I don't know, political manipulations. Psychological harassment, mobbing, all of these are public immorality, should be seen as problems. Of course, spreading false rumors, discriminating, both urbanizing, these are both morally and morally. These are problematic behaviors, as an example of an underdeveloped human being. They emerge. From that perspective, we need to look at the issue in multiple dimensions. For example, if a manager makes short-term decisions and acts populist, there is still a moral problem. Because in the long term, he has abandoned something that is beneficial to society. Or by acting populist instead of the general interests, he has chosen a special segment within that society. When viewed in this way, it is possible to say that there is indeed a lot to talk about in the field of management and ethics.
Yes, we still have many problems. We are alone with many problems waiting to be solved, sir. We hope that this will create awareness for our audience as well. Thank you very much for your valuable comments.
I thank you too. Thank you.
Dear viewers, we talked about management and morality today. See you in the next episode. Goodbye.